All right, here we are, January 25th, 2012. Just going to go over some F patterns here so we can kind of understand what's going on with the intraday chart and how to understand them. So, looking at this pattern on the daily chart, you look at this one candle here and you see a big bar with a little upper extended shadow, and that's all you see. But within that candle, there's a whole nother story being told. So it's definitely important that you understand and are able to look at intraday patterns, especially in today's volatile market, so you understand, what's going on throughout the session, and you can kind of give yourself a better idea of, potential areas to add to your position, potential areas to buy stock, rather than playing solely off of daily charts. So intraday patterns have a whole nother story to be told over a daily chart, and it's definitely highly important that you understand them. So we're going to go over some price action today on these stocks. So first up is FBN. Starting out the session, I'm using the 2-minute chart because that's what I like to use for the first hour or two. I'll just kind of give you a smaller scale of what's going on, so you can kind of see better with smaller candles. So first off, we had this opening price here at about 151. You can see that's what this yellow line indicates here on this TC 2000 chart platform that I'm using. So you can see that it kind of formed at this little triangle formation here, and a breakout above that first little flag within the first half an hour is what I call an F1 pattern. So that's the first indication of a buy signal. Once that flag breaks to the upside, you can see as soon as that 151 level broke, it got a huge amount of volume in here and actually just spiked right up past yesterday's resistance. And you can look over here on the daily chart. This was basically a triangular formation. I actually had this on the watch list as a potential buy in the 150 150-ish range. And you can see that once it broke out above yesterday's high here as well, that was kind of a daily chart pattern indication of a buy. And that's what you can see here. That's the high of yesterday was 155. And as soon as it broke that, it still ramped up very fast. But the intraday story tells it a little differently and told you to kind of buy in down here lower around 150 to 151. It's much harder to spot the intraday patterns because they happen much quicker than a daily chart pattern. But that's why it's so important to understand intraday charts so that you can try to get in quicker than anybody else that's only solely looking at daily chart patterns. So moving forward here, you can see that FBN actually ended up forming an F2 pattern as well. Here, let's switch to a 5-minute chart here. So you can see that first F1 pattern breaking above the daily opening high with that small little F1 flag pattern, which that would have been hard to see unless you were watching this stock near the opening. And I was, because I put it on my watch list as a potential breakout buy on the daily chart. But I actually missed this F1 pattern because it happened so quickly. But then going forward, you can see that it's actually formed up another triangular F2 pattern, which broke out to the upside, and that means another potential indication of a continuation forward. Maybe you want to add to your position here a small amount of shares because this broke out once again, and you're expecting that this might continue trending up. Or if you're just looking to scalp it, this is also a potential position or area to add to a potential just day trade scalp for this to potentially move higher. And as you can see, this actually broke out and then held up above the support level. So the ideal intraday F pattern is going to hold up above the breakout line and not fall back below that for some time into later to the session, or maybe not at all that session. But sometimes these will break out to the upside and then quickly drop back down, and it's actually a bull trap. And you need to quickly get out of that position because it might just be potentially that was its peak and it's breaking down to the downside. But in this situation for FBN, this was another F2 breakout pattern, which led to more upside movement where it actually went all the way up to about the 190 level from about 169 from that buy signal. So that it ramped up about 20 cents, and on a small stock like this, that's a pretty big move depending what kind of shares you have. Also, you can see that as soon as it started breaking down the 13 EMA, it didn't necessarily completely reverse, but what it did do is slow down and just kind of relax along this 13 EMA support on the 5-minute chart. So, when a stock breaks down the 13 EMA, it doesn't always completely mean trend reversal, but also what it could definitely mean is just that the stock's trend, might have been running out of steam now and might just be trading flat for the rest of the session. And that's exactly what happened here on FBN. But just to recap there, there was today looking at this one candle, all you're seeing is this one candle. You don't really know what's going on just by looking at a daily chart. But looking at the intraday chart, first off with the 2-minute pattern, looking back here on the 2-minute chart, you can see that opening F1 breakout pattern at about 150 to 151 was the first indication of a buy signal there. Then looking on the daily chart, it broke above yesterday's high, about 155. You can see right here that's another indication of a potential buy signal there. And then actually an intraday as well. Again, as I said, you can use 2-minute to 5-minute. It really depends on what you prefer. I switch off between both. But for now, we'll look at the 2-minute chart, and this broke out above this F2 pattern, which led to another big ramp up of about 20 cents that you could have sold into. You can see here on the 2-minute chart, it broke down the 13 EMA at about 180-ish level, whereas let's look at the 5-minute chart. The 13 EMA was more down about the mid 170s. So 2-minute chart's going to have a lot more choppiness through the 13 EMA, but might get you out of a stock quicker if that's what you're following as your exit strategy. So that's pretty much it for FBN. Next one is HGSI, stock to be looking at here. This was a pretty choppy trade on HGSI. You can see here daily chart wise, it's another similar pattern to FBN, where it was ramping up and then broke out above yesterday's high, as well as these past couple days. So that's a multi-day, almost an F4 pattern there, that it broke out above this resistance here and then ended up breaking up above the actual highs and ramping up and continuing going. But intraday, looking at the intraday with the 13 EMA, this stock was kind of all over the place throughout the rest of the session. But starting off at the get-go, it was right along the 13 EMA into the open. So let's look a little bit closer at the opening price action here. You can see quickly the stock kind of gapped open slightly, had that very quick F1 pattern formation. So it's kind of hard to get into that right at the open. But you can also see here, looking back, this was actually a multi-day F4 breakout of resistance right around that 920-ish level, which led to a breakout above resistance at about 930-ish as well, which was the high of the daily chart at 934, and you can see these past peaks at about 930. So when it broke out above that level, that was another indication here. But straight out of the gates in the morning, there was that first signal of a potential breakout right out at the open, which broke out above this mini flag pattern on the intraday chart, as well as looking at the yesterday's intraday action. It broke up above these resistance peaks right around here. And then looking forward into the opening of the session, you can see that this rode the 13 EMA all the way up, so that could have been just a trend to follow very quickly just in the morning. As long as it holds up above the 13 EMA, there's a bullish trend there, and that's exactly what it did, all the way up to $10 per share, which is that whole number resistance area that actually peaked out on the daily chart as well. So HGSI was a very quick opening intraday breakout. You can see that it broke out above here on the F4 pattern, multi-day intraday resistance, right out of the open on F1 pattern, looking on the 2-minute chart, and then just rode the 13 EMA all the way up from there, and then finally breaking down right about here. And then the rest of the session was kind of all over the place. It's not really any kind of play that I like to trade on a stock like this. I look for that quick breakout and then a push up from there. Whereas, throughout the rest of this session, the stock was basically just range bound, going up and down, up and down. So that's not really something I look for in a stock. So this would have been, a tough stock to be holding intraday, as it was kind of just all over the place. All right, now we're looking at a couple F2 patterns. F2 is about 10 a.m. to about 1:30 p.m. During that breakout zone period. So first up is BZH. Looking here at the daily chart, nothing too exciting here. It's kind of got this choppy up and down action, but looking at the intraday chart, you can see that this ramped up this morning. First had this initial spike, and then you can see it forming up this kind of triangular formation here. Now looking at about here, you're looking at this stock. It's got resistance about the high of 316 here. So this is a solid looking F2 pattern. A breakout above this 316 level, definitely is an indication of a potential continuation throughout the rest of the session. Maybe it's a quick spike. Maybe this is just the beginning of another huge run into the close. It's hard to say what it's going to do, but looking at this pattern, you can see that it first ramped up with the nice little increase in volume this morning, getting that phase 2 consolidation here, which is followed by a potential breakout to the upside, and that's exactly what happened. You can see here, right, as it broke 316, now we got this nice intraday F2 pattern breakout. So, looking forward into the close, you can see that this ramped up about 315 up to about 331. That's about 15 cents rally there to take advantage of. And then broke down the 5-minute chart at about 325 and then just kind of leveled off. It didn't completely trend reverse here. But once it starts trading into that 13 EMA, that's either potential trend reversal or the stock might just be slowing down and just kind of be trading sideways throughout the rest of the session. So this is just a great example of a F2 pattern where we get this perfect little intraday triangle setup. As soon as that breaks out to the upside, this got a nice 15 cent rally there on BZH. So that's a perfect looking F2 pattern right there on BZH. Next up, let's look at HOVE, HOV. Same perfect pattern here on HOV. You can see this is kind of having a bullish setup here. This flag formation kind of setting up on the intraday or daily chart that actually broke out today above that 250-ish level. To the upside, also been riding the 13 EMA, got this bounced up the 13 EMA level on the daily chart. But looking intraday, let's delete this trend line. You can see it got the first ramp up this morning. Here's the opening right here, got that ramp up this morning, then kind of leveled off. Actually, you can see it had a F1 breakout here. F1s are very quick. First got that first little consolidation, then broke out above that level of high at 242 on pretty hefty volume. From there, it didn't really do much, but it was kind of trading sideways. And on the 5-minute chart, you see it kind of rode back into the 13 EMA, but didn't trend reverse. It just kind of traded sideways along the 13 EMA, and then actually formed up this next neckline at about 240. Looks like 247. So a breakout above this zone of 247, then you're looking at a potential another ramp up in price action. So that's exactly what happened here. First got that first F1 little flag breakout here, but didn't really get much momentum off that level, but still had up, kind of traded sideways along the 13 EMA, and then formed up this F2 pattern right here and broke out right here at about 115. And so that's, another buy signal, not necessarily another buy signal, but an indication that this stock is, potentially heading higher. The next leg is apparently could be upon us, and that's exactly what happened on HOV. Got that quick spike up about 10 cents. Barely broke down the 13 EMA, so you might have thought about selling here as it broke down, but 13 EMA is never perfect. and it actually got a ramp up into the close and closed up near highs a day. But this was another perfect example of a F2 pattern of. All right, so next up, we're looking at REE here. And a stock doesn't always have to be initially moving up. The stock can be gapping up, form up a F pattern, or it can gap down and potentially form an F pattern, which might result in a squeeze higher. And that's exactly what happened here with stock REE. You can see on the daily chart, nothing much going on here. You can't really see what's really going on here just by looking at these last two candles. It's kind of hard to find a buy indicator there looking at that candle, but looking at the intraday chart, let's zoom in here a bit on REE's intraday pattern here. You can see that it actually gapped down this morning and actually kind of had a breakout above here, which could have been a F1 pattern right at the beginning, but it actually failed to break out. So, you might have gotten stopped out here. Maybe you didn't even notice a stock or anything, but, it kind of had a failed breakout here when it broke out above this high. These intraday patterns are, very quickly and fast paced, and, they don't always work out perfectly. But when you move forward, it did finally build a neckline that actually broke out on very strong volume here, which was a buy indicator. Looking at this stock, so this turned into a F2 pattern after that gap down this morning. You can see here, and once that broke out above this intraday flag here, this thing just ripped up to the new highs here and above yesterday's closing price. Right about here with this yellow. So, first it might get a gap fill here, and that might be an area where people might get spooked out and take their profits. That would have been a nice little scalp there. But, you never know what a stock's going to do, and this thing actually just ripped up here from about 550 up to just over $6 per share. So that could have been a huge, intraday move there to be buying into, right? If you can get in. Watching this intraday pattern, and then if it breaks out to the upside of the resistance and the neckline, that's the potential that this stock might be moving up, and that's exactly what happened here with RE. So looking at the daily chart, you might just be looking at this like, oh, this stock gapped down. I don't really want to buy in here. It's not looking like it's going to do anything. But when you look at the intraday pattern, this is actually an F2 breakout pattern. So, there's, like I said before, there's always a whole different story within the intraday pattern as opposed to just looking at one candle. So you can see that this broke out of the neckline, followed the 13 EMA. We're still on the 2-minute chart here. So this followed the 13 EMA all the way up to about $6 per share before breaking down. And then kind of reversing the trend from about $6 back down to the 570 level, where it ended up actually closing back up above near right around highs of the day. So, after that first initial move, it was pretty volatile and kind of a range-bound stock. But, you could have took advantage of that first move following the 13 EMA, and then the breakdown of the 13 EMA might have been an area where you might want to take some profit and get out of that position, or just lock in some of that profit, as you never know what's going to happen throughout the rest of the session. You can see that this was pretty up and down through there, but ended up closing at the highs of the day if you're going to be a swing trader and hold it overnight. But always potentially a good idea to lock in some profits on the breakdown of the 13 EMAs. Just as a quick indication of where you might be getting out as a day trade or just scout position. So, same thing here, looking at the 5-minute chart. This is the same pattern here. Just a little bit shorter candles because you're looking at a 5-minute candle rather than two. This broke down the 13 EMA on the 5-minute around the 590-ish level, whereas the 13 EMA on the 2-minute chart was about $6 per share. But that's just a good example of a gap down F pattern breakout to the upside, and how that can rip up there, as you can see here, as it did on REE. Next up was GBG. This is something that I'm actually in here today. I bought this basically based off of the daily chart because it's actually a Foos revival pattern. You can see as it's breaking out, as that intraday or daily chart, bearish trend followed by consolidation. Now we're breaking out above this resistance here. You can see, you can draw the neckline down. We broke out about 112 to 113. Actually, I saw this stock late and didn't get into 114, so I'm a little late to the party. But looking at this intraday, the ideal entry here on this stock, you can see that it first ramped up. Here's the opening price, about 104, ramped up a little bit, and then formed this intraday neckline. You can see here at 106, and as soon as that neckline broke out to the upside, it got a huge push, and this stock ramped up from about 107 up to about 118. So almost a 20-cent move there on a low price stock like this is a pretty significant move to be buying into. So same pattern here. This is actually a F2 pattern as it broke out about 12:30 or so. So that was the first indication of a buy signal on GBG. Then it didn't get the daily chart signal until it broke out about this 112-ish level. So that first indicator of the buy was about 107, 106. So it's a great reason why you want to understand intraday patterns. As you might be seeing the intraday pattern and then what it could be potentially breaking out of later on the daily chart. But you might see this first thinking, hey, it's breaking out of this intraday F pattern, and then looking on the daily chart, if it breaks 112, that's going to be a big daily chart breakout. So that first indication of a potential move was right here on the F pattern. Then there was actually the FUS4 revival pattern breakout at 112, and now actually looking into the close here, this actually formed up F3 pattern that didn't break out yet to the upside, but now we have this neckline and formation formed here. Now we have a multi-day potential breakout. If this breaks out above this 118 level tomorrow, then we have basically an F4 multi-day breakout formation, and that could be a good sign that this stock is actually going to swing higher tomorrow based off of this intraday neckline that's formed here. And then that's going to push in tomorrow that if we break this level, that's going to be a good signal that we might be moving higher on GBG. What's next here? HNSN or CPST. This is one that I actually lost on here today as well. I was looking at the daily chart pattern, potential revival here. We kind of got this neckline resistance. Also breaking out above here. I wanted to see this level break out above 129, which could have led to this, just ramping up here. There isn't really any resistance between here and about 150-ish, so we could have saw a nice push up there. But I was looking at this intraday chart pattern. Here we are on the, let's switch to a 5-minute chart. You can see here's the opening right here, January 25th. We got this nice ascending triangle formation forming up here, and then it broke out to the upside right here on huge volume. So I bought in right as this was breaking out here, and it actually quickly was a false breakout and came back down and started break down below the 13 EMA and actually stopped out at about 126. I got in at 129 right at this breakout, and it didn't move into the close, so that was unfortunate. It could definitely still have potential to move up higher tomorrow if it gets some momentum out of the open, but this failed to break out here. It's a pretty thick stock, but after that breakout to the upside, that's a big indicator that we could be seeing higher prices according to the intraday chart pattern there. But it quickly sold off, and I got stopped out. I sold at 126 right down here. As I wasn't sure what it was going to do. It closed right at about 128, but I got out of this position due to the fact that it failed to hold that breakout above this neckline. But the daily chart, this could still potentially push past this level, but failed to break out above that F2 pattern there. So I got out. Actually, this was F3, being that we're past 130 on the chart here. Next up, maybe we have one more, PPHM. This is an F4 pattern. As you can see here, we have 1, 2, 3 days here of this kind of consolidating with highs of about 104 to 105. So I was looking to buy into this at about 104 to the 105 level if this broke out above these resistance levels that it's been forming over the past 2 days. And then also being that it's right around $1 stock, that could definitely see some upside momentum to break out to new highs. Looking at the daily chart, we're looking at this little flag formation here, hopefully breaking out above this 104 to 105 level that were the highs of these last 2 days to potentially ramp up here. It got a very short-term spike to the upside and then broke out again of another flag, F2 pattern here, but this thing just absolutely failed and didn't get any upside momentum. Started breaking down the 13 EMA, and then we had this kind of horizontal support where it was ranging between 105 and 106. And as soon as that 105 level broke down to the downside, this just got a lot of heavy selling all the way down to 99 cents. So stocks trading around $1. Sometimes you're going to buy into a breakout like this, and this stock could ramp up 20 to 30%. Other times, it might just be a quick false breakout and it's going to drop on you quick, and you might lose, a decent amount of money pretty quick. I lost about $450 on this trade today because this intraday pattern, F4 multi-day pattern, didn't break out to the upside and hold, and I got stopped out. So I was an unfortunate trade, but that's a good example of trying to see these intraday patterns break, but they quickly fail and break down. All right, so getting started here on January 26th. Just going to look at some more F patterns today, starting with the F1 right out of the gates this morning on EXEL. You can see here right out of the gates. Here's the opening right here. You got a gap open right at the opening. As soon as it gapped open, it kind of consolidated here. Remember, we're on the 2-minute chart right at the opening for the first hour or so, and then it broke out above this neckline little triangular formation. So F1 pattern happens very fast right at the open, usually with a gap up or some kind of move up in the morning. As well, it can be a gap down as we saw on REE yesterday and a breakout to the upside, but it's the same situation. Either way, it forms this triangular formation and breaks out to the upside on volume. As you can see here, as soon as that ripped to the upside, it got volume in here with a spike, and then from there it continued upwards fairly significantly, up from about $5 up to, rallied up as high as 31 cents before breaking down the 13 EMA and having an intraday trend reversal. So that was a good indication of a potential buy here on EXEL, that this could be having a big run right out of the gates this morning, and that's exactly what it did on this F1 pattern. Also looking at the daily chart, it's a decent looking revival pattern here that could be breaking out to the upside and continue higher from here. So that was an initial first buy signal right there on the daily chart, but also looking at the intraday chart over here, but looking at the daily chart, this also has a pretty solid overall about month and a half long triangle pattern that broke out today. So it's both looking good on daily and intraday, so it's important that you're looking at both. That's why when I'm trading, I pull up a stock chart and it automatically pulls up the intraday chart as well as the daily chart, so I can see what's going on in both time frames at the same exact time. So I can see if the daily chart looks good, and it also is looking to see if the intraday pattern could be leading into a daily chart breakout. Exactly what's happening here with that F1 this morning, which led to the daily chart breakout at about 5:13. So usually the daily or intraday F patterns are going to give you earlier implicator that the breakout might be coming for the daily chart, which is why I'm teaching you about these F patterns in the first place. So looking into the rest of the session, you can see that the stock had been bouncing all around the 13 EMA. So as for swing trades, if the stock initially breaks down below a 13 EMA on the intraday chart, if you're looking for a swing, it's not that big of a deal. If you're looking to, maybe cut down on some of your position and take your losses or take a bit of profits off of your swing trade, it's a good indication that there might be a trend reversal here, exactly what happened when it broke down the 13 EMA on the daily chart and then reversed back down, pushing back almost down towards where the breakout even happened. But looking into the close of the day, the stock continued to rally up and closed just near the highs of the session. So, the intraday 13 EMA is basically an indicator of short-term movements within the actual session. But, daily chart, all you're looking at here is this one big fat white candle, open near the bottom and closed near the top, up almost 9%. So that's just great example of an F1 pattern here. Right out of the gates, you can see that this thing just ripped to the upside, broke that little flag pattern, which eventually broke out of this daily chart pattern over here. So now let's look at a couple F2 patterns. First up is USU. This is one that I actually played today and got stopped out by a penny before this thing blew up into the close, almost 13%. So this was a it was about almost a F1 F2 pattern, right? Just past the F1 barrier there that I like to look at. But let's get a closer look at USU. You can see this stock is a pretty thick stock. It's got decent volume. Today it traded 3.6 million, so it's got a lot of shares and liquidity, so you can get in and out of this thing. Looking at the daily chart, we were watching this yesterday actually in chat. This was a revival pattern breakout, retested the 13-day moving average down here, as well as the breakout support level that was made by these past peaks. So this was a good buy indicator that this stock may be bouncing up these levels. Some of my members got in yesterday on this candle. I ended up buying in today at 150. I actually mentioned at 149, then it spiked up, and I bought on a dip back down to the 150 breakout level. So I was hoping to see that this 150 level was going to hold and that we spiked up from there. But when it breaks back down below this neckline, that's somewhat of an indicator that it might be a false breakout. And so we came back down, kept holding up around 149 to 151, and then we sold off again right here. And I said, you know what, I'm getting out here at 150, taking my break even. I don't want to see this thing drop on this false breakout. And then I got out for break even. But it was only dropped that one penny to 149 for a short period of time, and then we came back up here and actually broke out again to the above these recent highs, basically forming kind of a F2 pattern here, which broke out, came and tested support again, and then moved into the close all the way up to about 162. So I bought in about 15,000 shares at $1.50, sold at $1.50. Barely got stopped out there, because it's easy to get stopped out when you're just following an intraday chart, when you're not looking at it as a total swing. But I was just trying to get a nice push up here right after this break. Unfortunately, it broke down for a second there, and I just, playing it extremely safe. I like to cut my losses really quickly if the stock's not going my way, and sometimes I miss out on a lot of profits. Just like this, I would have made about $1,500 on this stock today. Instead, I sold it for break even. But at least I didn't lose anything. But perfect example of a F2 to F1 breakout here. First spike open, morning consolidation, breakout above the highs of this flag. And it ripped and then came back down, kind of retested 13 EMA. Let's look at the 5-minute chart on this, maybe get a better idea. So it kind of broke down the 13 EMA on the 5 here as well. But overall, this stock continued to trend up, coming back down below the 13 EMA several times, but never really getting any clear breakdown below it. So it was a little bit of a choppy stock into the close, but closed right up at highs of the day at about 162, 163. So that was another perfect example of a breakout F pattern right out of the gates, which led to a rally into the close, closing at the highs of the day. Next up is TRX. Okay, TRX yesterday. This is one that I bought into right about right here as we were breaking out above this neckline resistance. This was actually F3 into the close of yesterday. So you can see here at the opening, uh, breaking out to the upside right here, which is also a revival pattern on the daily chart over here with this neckline breaking out. So, first off, this was an intraday breakout here with a good indicator that this could be having a run into the close of this session. And it did get a nice little run up into the close, but it didn't get that strong of a close. Actually closed right back down to where the breakout point was. But, a breakout into the close like this on an intraday pattern definitely indicates that there could be some momentum going forward in the next day, and that's exactly what happened the next day, and actually locked in about $915 on this gain on this trade today, selling into this morning spike. And looking at the intraday chart this morning as well, this is actually somewhat of a F1 failed breakout pattern. So this is a good example of a failed F1 as well this morning. So you can see yesterday it had that F3 breakout right into the close, which led to a strong gap in the morning. But then this morning, you can see that, let's pull this chart a little closer here. So when you're looking at this stock chart in the morning, you're basically looking at this chart. You're like, okay, this thing's looking pretty good. It's flagging here. This could be a potential buy again. Okay, it broke out. Here looks like a potential F2 or F1 buy chart here, and this could be ripping more to the upside. And it was a pretty good looking chart on the daily, just breaking out of this revival. So that could have been a potential breakout. I actually sold half my position right about here, about 335. Once it started breaking out, or I think it was right about here, I sold at 335 because it failed the first time, came back down, retested the 13 EMA on the 2-minute chart. Then I sold half of this position at about 335 on this spike right here as it was kind of falling back down. So this is a great example of a failed F pattern right out of the gates. You can see it consolidated, tried to break, had decent volume, spiked up, but failed to hold the breakout level, and then came back down, broke down the 13 EMA, and it never returned up to those levels again. And it might always not rally back up. A stock can easily have a failed morning breakout pattern, dip, and then come back and break out again. But this is a perfect example of why, if you're trying to play a F pattern, why you might want to be getting out of that position if you're trying to buy into a breakout. Because if it doesn't hold the breakout as well as breaks down the 13 EMA, that's definitely an implication of a false breakout. And you can see here on the daily chart, we have a bearish hammer candle now formed because it failed to break out to the upside of this morning F pattern on the intraday chart. And now on the daily chart, it's a bearish candle. So that's a great example of a failed F pattern. Out of the morning, next up is GMO. This is another stock we played today. I actually made $810 on this stock. So first off, looking at the daily chart here, it's got a nice looking triangular breakout pattern, somewhat of a revival pattern, decent volume. So the stock was, sitting right around here, the 350 range when I first bought into it. But then when we look at the daily chart or intraday chart, forgive me, it's hard to get all these things right when I'm saying daily and intraday all day long. But it's a perfect example of another F1 and an F2 pattern here. So for instance, here's the opening price where this yellow line is. We got that first spike up. You can see volume came in, and then it had this flag formation. You can see this little triangle. So F1 patterns are very quick right at the open. They're just tiny little flag patterns that kind of consolidate for the first 4 to 10 candles on the 2-minute chart, and then they break out to the upside on volume. You can see here as soon as this broke out above this high here at about 349, it got another big spike in volume. So that was an indication of a potential continuation forward on the intraday chart. I actually didn't buy into this until this broke out at 355. So you can see this was actually another, this was an F1 right here. This larger candle is actually a F2 pattern. but it was a perfect little triangle formation, and as soon as that broke out to the upside, it got another spike in volume, which led to a big move from about 355 up to highs of about 375. So, it was a 20-cent move. I scalped it, basically day traded this from this intraday breakout here. Then it started breaking down the 13 EMA up here in the 370s, halted at about 375. I sold at 373. I believe was my exit price on that. Yes, it was 373-ish. Made $810, but this is a perfect example of using All right, so next up we're looking at GMO. This is actually a F1 and an F2 pattern breakout. I actually bought into the stock on an F2 pattern today. And you can also see here on the daily chart that the daily chart was pretty bullish. You can see that it broke out of this descending resistance line. This was somewhat of a revival pattern today. As it broke out here, that was an indication on the daily chart that it was a potential move higher, and it rallied almost 8% today. But looking at the intraday chart, what we're focusing on in this DVD, you can see here, let's move back towards the opening. You can see here right out of the gates this morning, it gapped open, or didn't really gap open, I guess it did a little bit, about 5 cents or so, but it got that first initial spike this morning on volume, and then kind of consolidated here. This is the 2-minute chart. Remember, that's what we use for F1 patterns. And then moving forward, you can see it broke out of this flag pattern to the upside on extremely large volumes. That was definitely a big indication that this could be a F1 pattern that's going to be breaking up higher, not only because of the daily chart, but just this intraday F1 pattern. This is a buy signal here on this volume spike as it broke out above these highs made of this morning flag consolidation on this F1 pattern right at the open. Going forward, it got another spike, and then it kind of just consolidated here, forming actually what's an F2 pattern. So we have a second consolidation forming here. So another breakout above this 355 mark, and that's a potential buy. And actually bought into this stock at 355 right as it broke out here. I was actually anticipating this. I had been talking about this on Foos TV, saying, hey, watch this GMO is a potential trade here if this can break out 355. So I ended up buying in right at 355. And of course, here comes the volume in. You always like to see a big amount of volume coming in is preferred. And the most bullish breakouts are going to have that confirmation of volume. So we can actually switch to the 5-minute chart here on this F2 pattern breakout, since we're a little bit later into the day. This stock basically just rode the 13 EMA all the way up to the 370s, about 375, and then it broke down, started trading below it, and actually broke down. I actually locked in my profit at 373. I made about $810 on this trade. So it was a quick day trade. On the daily chart here, this is day one of the breakout. So this can definitely have, a week-long or 2-week-long rally. higher from here, potentially up to $4 plus, but I was in and out on this trade just based off of the intraday chart here. We got that F2 pattern breakout. First got that first signal on this F1, but I bought in on the F2 here at 355. I took the move here about 20 cents, peaked out at about 375, so about a almost 20-cent move. I took it at 373 as it started breaking back down below the 13 EMA. I didn't want to see this come crashing down potentially if this was just going to be an intraday spike. So it actually came back down and closed at about 367. So I got out higher than the close, but that was a perfect example of an F2 pattern. As soon as it breaks, it's going to have a quick rally up. We stayed above the breakout neckline here, didn't even get to retest it. So these are the best kind of breakouts when you don't have to worry. Sometimes it'll break out to the upside and then come back down and retest, maybe just slightly below it, or it'll be sitting right along this neckline, and you're sitting there kind of nervous, wondering what the hell this stock is going to do. But GMO just ripped to the upside for 20 cents right after this breakout. Broke down the 13 EMA, I got out, and then closed at 367. So, that was a perfect intraday move there to take advantage of an F pattern. But, daily chart looks good as well. So it's always good when these daily charts and intraday charts are looking good together. But, it still looks like a potential swing trade according to the Foos 4 strategy. But, I just took quick profits, moved on, and played it safe. Next up was GERN. This is another, let's see, this is a F2 pattern breakout here. You can see this is also a great looking chart on the daily chart pattern. Basically have a revival chart. I actually didn't buy into this stock today. I was a little sketched out by these other spikes here. I didn't want to see this stock come back down and have a bearish hammer candle. As you can see, every time this spiked up above these levels, it got sold off pretty quick, but stocks were pretty hot today, and this is a perfect F2 pattern here. So let's look back on this stock. Looking here, we got that first spike right at the open, then consolidating. So this is basically what you're watching throughout the session, and a breakout above this neckline at about 183. That's a potential sign that this is going to head higher. And that's exactly what this did. There we go, the big volume in here on the breakout, and then this just started ripping into the close. Came back down, retested the 13 EMA support on the 5-day chart, or 5-minute chart, and then got another ramp up to about $2 per share. Still riding the 13 EMA, and then just, this isn't a perfect trend. You might have gotten stopped out here if you're following exactly the 13 EMA, and obviously it's not going to be, perfect every single time where it bounces right off the 13 EMA. It's going to be, give or take a couple cents above or and below the stock. It just depends on what your patience level is and how, if you're swing trading the stock, then the intraday pattern isn't that important. But you can see here that it broke out above here, rode the 13 EMA pretty much all the way into the close, and closed up near highs of the session. So this is a perfect example of an F2 pattern breakout intraday. And it also had a nice daily chart. It also doesn't always have to have a nice daily chart as well, but if they're both working together, all the better. And those are the trades that are probably going to have the highest probability of winning. But these breakout patterns can work basically, even if there's no real intraday chart as well. But I prefer to be trading the stocks that have both daily and intraday charts that are looking good together. Now let's look at a couple F3. These are the late day breakouts. First up was ENER. You can see this ripped up into the right out of the open. Let's take a look at the 2-minute chart at the opening. So this kind of had a F1 pattern today as well. You can see it ramped up here right at the open and then broke out to highs above, actually. So this broke out above yesterday's high as well at about 103, it looks like here. It's kind of F4 pattern here as well. So it broke out above a 2-day. F4 is basically just multiple candles forming a breakout here. So that broke out above the highs, retested it right at the open, got an F1 pattern formation, broke out to the upside all the way up to 108, came all the way back down to 102. So, stocks at about $1, these things are highly volatile and easy to get stopped out of, if you're trying to trade them quickly. But moving along here, you can see that this kind of just started trending and forming this consolidation here. Let's switch to the 5-minute chart now that we're heading into the longer session here. So we got this neckline kind of formed here at 108. So, following this stock into the close, there we get the breakout, huge spike in volume as soon as this broke out above 108, this past high. From there, this thing just ramps up huge all the way into the close. Never actually even broke down the 13 EMA, closed up near highs of the session, but a perfect F3 pattern breakout. Get that morning spike, consolidation, perfect neckline formed. Wait for that breakout. You're looking for that volume to occur right on that spot on breakout. Almost 200,000 shares came in right when this broke the day's high, the neckline. So that's a pretty big indication that this stock might be breaking to the upside. And then boom, from about 110 all the way up to about 130-ish into the close. I think I have one more here for today. GURE. Yes, this was another one into the close here. So you can see this ramped up right at the morning, and then we got that same thing, just building a neckline. It basically had a neckline here. It spiked up a little bit, but also had that highs right here. But it actually got volume in right about here, and it broke out above 277, ramped up from here, and got a nice little spike into the close. Now this thing closed at highs of the day. But just another great example of a F3 pattern. Patterns that are like this, that close up near highs of the day and have a really strong close, these are the kind of stocks that are probably going to gap open into the tomorrow's session. So, these are the kind of stocks on a swing. You'd maybe want to lock in profits if this breaks out and gaps up over $3 per share. But anyways, that's it for today, January 26th. Those are the F charts that were all in play for today's session.